On this week's episode of Diverse Creativity, Barry Selick and Cheif Del Cardayre dive into what innovation means and how it applies to their everyday job. With the perspective of the shark and the minnow, Cheif and Barry give their own unique perspective on what it means to be creative and how to use it.
My role at UCSF is really focused on extracting value from the inventions that are created by UCSF scientists and students, and then helping to form partnerships with pharmaceutical companies, starting companies that are backed by venture capital investors, and then funding our own most promising internal programs with a fund that we've raised at UCSF called the Invent Fund. I'd say, the most relevant descriptor of innovation is creative. It's got to be creative. And ideally, it fills some sort of need. You can be creative in an artistic sense. Doesn't necessarily fill a need. So I think innovation has got to be creativity that's directed to some sort of useful end.
So creativity kind of drives innovation, and innovation drives creativity in a sense.
Well, it's one thing to be creative. It's another thing to take that creativity and focus and translate it into something that's tangible, that's going to be useful to patients and to society. So I'd say a major function of innovation ventures is to work with faculty to translate their ideas into product concepts or therapeutic concepts or diagnostic concepts, and help them understand what studies they need to do in order to demonstrate the utility of their invention in such a product, and then help them to secure either funding through venture capital investment to form a startup company.
I think the creative idea behind Zero Acre Farms actually came from my co-founder, Jeff, who was looking for a way to replace these toxic vegetable oils. And what I bring to the table is the, how are we going to do it from a biotechnology perspective? So if we know what we want to do now, how do you actually do that? And that's, I think, that's where my creativity is coming in here.
When you work in an area, you know more about the area than almost anyone else out there. So, in my current role, if someone comes to me with an invention for novel treatment for asthma, and I dismiss them for whatever reason I can think of, that's really their responsibility to come back and convince me why I'm wrong, that I have not thought as long and hard and deep about the problem as they have. And more often than not, they're right. Okay, so when you're on the opposite end of that, when you're the inventor and you tend to be more familiar with the space that you're inventing in than almost anyone else, it's not something I was ever anxious about or losing sleep over. At the end of the day, you know what exists in the field, and you're probably in a better position than almost anyone else to argue for its novelty and utility.
Being able to see beyond, again, I think that the fun part of innovation, so creative and innovation are two sides of maybe the same coin, but being able to see beyond the constraints of your assumed box, that the people put limitations in front of themselves based on what they think they know. And if you can look around and assume that those limitations don't exist, and you can dream beyond those limitations, then you begin to predict, you can begin to ask yourself, well, what if we could do that? And then instead of assuming that it can't be done because it can't be done today, ask the questions of, well, why not? And start breaking down the why nots into smaller and smaller achievable to-dos. To be creative, I'm a big believer that part of the creative side is having structure. A piano, you can't just untune a piano and play it and make it sound nice. It's very difficult. So there's this structure that's within it that opens up the creativity that's there. Same with any instrument, colors, paints, all that stuff, right? There is some structure, and it requires practice. It's you don't just wake up and go, I think I'm going to be a brilliant creative guy and figure out a rocket today. It's not going to happen. It takes a lot of work, a lot of discipline to master the fundamentals that then unlock your ability to be creative.
Reporting for Scott Center News, I'm Josh Barty.